Yanderella is a free-to-play RPG Maker horror game that you can download right now if you feel like it. Link in the description, of course, but if you just want to get a nostalgia trip by listening to me yap about this game, please feel free to like, comment, subscribe, etc. But with that out of the way, in this video I'm going to tell you all about Yanderella. All its endings, how it plays, who made it, and my overall thoughts on it. Long story short, in my opinion, this RPG Maker horror game / visual novel, it's pretty much Doki Doki Literature Club meets Higurashi. For now, just let me give you a brief overview, okay? So Yanderella is a 2013 RPG Maker horror game created by Charon. Now, Charon is a group of developers who have been making both RPG Maker horror games as well as visual novels for over a decade now. Just look at this absolute smorgasbord of games. Arguably, their most popular works are that of the focus of this video, Yanderella, and the other most infamous is probably that of The Dark Side of Red Riding Hood, which is pretty grim and dark. Those are at least the two games I've heard about from Charon prior to making this video. The way I heard about Yanderella specifically was due to this old video from Manlybadasshero. I don't think I even watched him play it at the time. I just remember seeing the title screen in his thumbnail so vividly. Then a couple years passed, it popped back up into my feed, so I got curious. I watched him play through a bit of it before he got to one of the endings, because I decided to go through all the endings on my own to experience it for myself, which, to be honest, didn't take all that long, since Yanderella is much more of a visual novel than an RPG Maker game in essence, at least in regards to the actual gameplay itself. It takes less than 2 hours or so to get all 3 endings of this game. In this game of Yanderes' death and the MC defecating himself, the gameplay aspect is relatively simple and tame. So let's get into the actual gameplay, since there isn't actually much to say about it, due to how simple it really is. The main focus of the gameplay is the visual novel aspect. You will spend most of your time, if you choose to download this game or just watch someone play through it, scrolling through dialogue boxes, pretty standard fare for visual novels to be honest. However, this is slightly broken up by dialogue choices that will dictate which ending you get, of which there are 3 as I said, but we'll get into them when I start talking about the plot of the game. The other part of the gameplay is centered around very minor exploration and going from point A to point B, like really simplistic stuff, which isn't a bad thing because it kind of just helps to break up the constant text scrolling, which can be pretty slow. I say this because most visual novels, when you spam left mouse or space or whatever key to proceed with the text, you can kind of fast forward a bunch, but here you have to slowly wait for the text to appear, then click, then appear, then click, which isn't a big deal, but it just kind of highlights how this game specifically was made on an older version of the RPG Maker engine, I think. And as a result of this seemingly older engine, this is how I had to play the game. For you, it's all nice and centered on the screen because of how I screen recorded it on OBS, but when I was playing it, I was stuck in this little window because when I made it go full screen, it got mega stretched out and it didn't look very nice. So the gameplay overall is just dialogue box, make dialogue choice, move in the overworld, more dialogue boxes, etc. Now, spoiler warning. With that being said, let's talk about the more interesting stuff. Let's talk about Yanderes. So, in the early 2010s, the Yandere craze kind of kicked off. Arguably the most, inarguably actually, the most prolific Yandere story that helped boost the archetype, the character type of the Yandere was, of course, Mirai Nikki. And from that one series, the Yandere, or lovesick character type, kind of shot off and became somewhat of a cultural phenomenon in the anime fandom for a period of time. And this game seemingly capitalized on that craze a little bit, since the game itself focuses on 2 potential Yanderes in Hinata and Hinako. Hinata, the blue-haired one, and Hinaka with the burgundy hair. The main character, the one you'll be playing as, is called Yataru, and over the course of the next 4 days in-game, you are going to decide which of these 2 childhood best friends you are going to spend the rest of your life with, no matter how short that life may be. Or you could just choose neither and get the quote-unquote bad ending or boring ending of the game, where no one dies and the game just calls you boring, but whatever. First, let's take a look at our 2 Yanderellas to give you a quick character profile, and then we can take a look at all 3 of the game's endings, and why I genuinely think this game is a bit of a sleeper gem. So first we have Hinata. Now, she's the first one you see when you boot up the actual game and start it. She's the one the story of Cinderella is in reference to in both the title and the intro to the game. She sees you, Yataru, as her prince who will come and save her, since, as I said, you were all childhood friends, all 3 of you, but Hinata had to move away to a different city when you guys were younger, and as a result, she wanted Prince Charming to come and save her. You. the main character. Pretty standard fare for a romance trope, but you know, it works. Both of the characters outside of their yandere tendencies are pretty archetypal. Hinata is soft-spoken, less rambunctious, you know, pretty much just like the Hinata you're more familiar with. Throughout the course of the game, you can choose to spend more time with either Hinata or Hinako. If you spend more time with Hinata, she will just reinforce how much she loves you, how much she sees you as her prince and her as Cinderella. She shows up to visit you since, as I say, she moved away when she was young, but with her visit, it's clear to see that she's trying to be with you, even getting jealous of Hinako since she got to stay in the same town or city with Yataru and didn't have to move away. Hinako, however, doesn't feel that way. Since she didn't move away like Hinata did, she assumed she'd spend more time with Yataru, but after Hinata left, Yataru became distant, stopped hanging out, dyed his hair blonde, and basically just started ignoring Hinako. However, despite all that, she still likes Yataru and likes him the entire time, in spite of him just kind of not really hanging out with her. She, just like Hinata, is very archetypal and kind of one note. Instead of the sweet, calm and collected type that Hinata is, Hinako is the more outgoing and loud, pretty much tsundere. You know, the standard anime trope of the extrovert. Nothing new for either of these characters, at least on the surface. That's pretty much all there is to say about these characters overall. Both of these girls have a crush on you, and it's up to you and the decisions you make throughout the game to determine which one you end up with, so to speak. Now, this is your last warning before I specifically spoil the end of the game, and I highly suggest just playing through one of the endings on your own, because it really took me by surprise when I played through it by myself, and it was a really cool experience. But if you just want to enjoy this video and not play it, I also understand. But I just wanted to give you one last shot before we get into it. So the reason I made the comparison between both Higurashi no Nako Koroni as well as Doki Doki Literature Club. Let's start with why I mentioned Higurashi first. So throughout the game, you are given plenty of choices for dialogue, as well as which girl you want to meet up with at night time. But in actuality, only one decision in the entire game matters. On day 3, you go to an arcade with the two girls, right? They try to get a bunny from a nearby claw machine. They can't get it, so you decide to give it a go, and you manage to get it first try. So here's the choice. Do you give the bunny to Hinata, Hinako, or do you just keep the piece and keep the bunny for yourself? Because, you know, plushies are dope. Just look at my plush Pochita. It's really cool. If you choose to keep it for yourself, you get the aforementioned boring ending. Nothing happens, no one dies, and the game just ends there. So what of the other two? So herein lies the Higurashi reference, or at least what I believe to be a reference or inspiration or something. It's very similar, okay? You see here, your decision of who to give the doll to will decide your fate. If you give the bunny to one girl, the other will kill you, and vice versa. And in Higurashi, we have a similar scenario in which the main character, well, kind of the main character, he wasn't at the end, but it doesn't matter. Keiichi wins a doll and chooses to give it to the wrong girl, Rena, and then in turn goes to this whole string of a butterfly effect of murders that happen. Then we find out later if Keiichi just gave the doll to a character called Mion instead of giving it to Rena, then he basically would have avoided a bad end. Whilst in Yanderella, no matter who you pick as Yataru, he's doomed from the start. It either ends with Hinata cutting off all of your limbs and crucifying Hinako. Hey, look, is that another Higurashi reference? And then after the crucifixion, she obviously then kills you. And in the other, Hinako pretends like Hinata never came back after she's cut up Hinata and put her in a box. Then she kills you by cutting off your manhood with a pair of scissors, which is the nice way to put it. Now, those of you with a good memory are probably thinking, well, that's all good and everything. You seem to think it has, you know, similarities with Higurashi, but what does that have to do with Doki Doki Literature Club? My reasoning is, before both of these girls kill you, they say a bunch of stuff that cut me off guard, and I really wish I was recording my voice when I first played through this for the video. But when they kill you, they acknowledge, obviously, how much they love you, but they also talk about how it's all your fault that this happened in the first place. You should have given them the bunny, but it's all right. You can just restart the game and do it again. This is all just an illusion, and they know it. They both shatter the fourth wall, and it's sort of out of left field. When I played through it first, I got Hinako's ending, so the sudden graphic nature of her cutting off my stuff with a pair of scissors, on top of everything about her telling me to restart the game, it was a really cool and like out of left field moment, which is why I wanted you to experience it yourselves. But I get not suddenly pausing a video to download a game to then play it for like an hour to then come back to the video. Seems like a bit much, but it's still just really cool to experience. I mean, when this happens, since it was made on the RPGMaker engine, it uses some of the same music as like Mad Father and Misao and stuff when these endings were happening, and it just heightened the situation for me even more. It was really cool. But now, the comparisons to Doki Doki that I made make a lot of sense, right? Two visual novel games focusing on yanderes who are self-aware of their roles in their respective games. Which is funny because Yanderella did it all the way back in 2013 and Doki Doki came out in 2017. So this little couple hour game was out here making relatively avant-garde and unique story points almost 5 years before Doki Doki made it a very well-known way for a visual novel to go in that direction. In conclusion, Yanderella is a short and sweet gem of a game. I'm genuinely surprised it didn't blow up as much as its contemporaries, despite it coming out around the same time, as a lot of classic RPG Maker horror games came out in the early 2010s. And I think it's a shame really, since it manages to be very memorable despite its shorter length, making use of the common anime traits and tropes of the introverted and extroverted girls, turning them into Yanderes, and in turn making them self-aware of the game they are in, way before Doki did it, much more prolifically due to its popularity. If you haven't played it before, or watched someone do so, I suggest you do, even with knowing how the endings go. It's still a fun enough journey, but yeah, that's my overall thoughts on Yanderella. With that being said, doodles my doodles, hopefully I'll see you in the next one. Peace.